Well, good evening, everybody. For those watching on YouTube and Twitter, and for those listening, it's another impromptu Cricket Unfiltered Live. I'm Menas, of course. I'm joined by Paul Dennett, and historic day for Australian cricket, Paul. Pat Cummins, our 47th Test captain.
Yes, it's obviously the circumstances were far from ideal, but I think that can be put to one side, and it can still be a celebration of a career that for a long time looked as though he was going to be the almost person of Australian cricket that everyone talks about, how he made his debut in 2011, was man of the match, and then for year after year after year after year was injured, and suddenly to have fulfilled the promise and to become Australia's first ever fast bowling captain on a regular basis is really nice. I listened to the press conference that he and Steve Smith did, and I was very impressed by the way that he spoke. I thought that he was a lot less. He sounded unfettered, as though he wasn't choosing all his words carefully and walking on eggshells. He was honest and expansive in some of his answers, and I thought that I thought it was a really good start. And poor circumstances, but a very satisfying appointment.
Yeah, I echo those sentiments, and I have to say that his press conference, it seemed like he was, a man born to lead this Australian Test side. He was both, paid tribute to Tim Paine and the legacy that he's left as a leader. He then wrapped his arms around Steve Smith, his vice captain, and made it very clear how badly he wanted Smith as his vice captain. And then, he just said all the right things. So, straight off the bat, you can tell why this is an appointment that had to happen.
He wrapped his arms around him metaphorically, didn't he? I didn't have the vision. He wasn't actually hugging.
Yeah, metaphorically, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just on that note, I'm going to pour myself a cup of coffee. As you know, listeners, Menas gets very angry when I'm late, so I was too scared to be late, but just going to pour that now. The thing that I was most impressed by was the answer he gave about whether he wanted to be the one-day captain as well. I was absolutely certain that his answer was going to be the cliched one, well, I haven't given it much thought, but if the honour came one day, blah, 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 which would have been a perfectly fine answer. And he basically said no. He sort of said, no, Test match is probably going to be the most for me. And also when they said, do you think that this is going to be something that for the rest of your career you want to be the Australian captain? And he was very candid as well. He said, well, if everything went well, I'd love to play for another 7 years. I can't see myself being captain for another 7 years. And I just thought those two answers, not so much the content of them, but just the fact that he felt so empowered to speak so honestly and candidly was a really pleasing sign.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the answer about the one day and white ball stuff makes a lot of sense because he's going to need to rest sometime. So it's obviously going to be now, not in a test match, but he might have to miss the odd T20 or the odd one day series to freshen up. So it makes sense that he wouldn't be the white ball skipper. But look, let's start with the sort of, unfortunate events of earlier today. It was scheduled that Tim Paine was going to line up for Tasmania in a domestic 50-over match taking on Western Australia, and that was going to be part of Tim Paine's rehabilitation from injury and then moving back into the Test side. And look, all things were pointing to Tim Paine playing at the Gabba. Lyon publicly backed him. There was a lot of support within the team, so it did seem like he probably would make it to the Gabba if he was fit. But then this morning a statement has come out saying that Tim Paine's going to take an indefinite break from cricket, and he just basically wants his privacy now. And what's your reaction when you heard the news, Paul?
Oh, very sad. And I think that, we've discussed at length about the incident itself, and that I've kind of said it ranges from if it was genuinely consensual and it's sort of, we don't know the full story behind that, then it wasn't, wasn't that bad. It was unseemly, but that was about it. If it was not consensual, then it was certainly a lot worse and deserving of severe. You don't have as much sympathy for him if that was the case. But either way, he's made a mistake, and to see him a week ago, Australian captain, one of the most celebrated sort of sporting figures in the country, about to lead his nation in a celebrated series, to suddenly now being out of the captaincy and out of the side and really obviously struggling a lot. I just felt great sympathy for him, and it's just a horrible situation. And, it sits very uncomfortably that someone who, I mean, I don't know him, but he always struck me as someone that I was likable. I mean, it doesn't matter whether someone's likable or not. They don't deserve to be feeling that way, but it is very sad that he's in that position.
Yeah, and it kind of came out of nowhere. Look, I guess we probably won't ever see him playing for Australia again. That's not confirmed, but all the reporters that seem pretty well sourced seem to think that this will be the end for Tim Paine and he won't play for Australia again. So he goes out in a really ignominious circumstances. So I wonder who now they'll pick for the Gabba to line up instead of him.
Yeah, I think it's just worth dwelling on that first point. I suppose technically it would be possible if in 3 days' time he announced, okay, I'm feeling better, that he could be then reconsidered. It just doesn't seem likely. I agree with you that it does seem that is the end of his international career, which is very sad. I would pick Carey, and I think they would pick Carey, but I'm kind of 70-30 that I think they'll pick Carey. So if it was to be Inglis, then it wouldn't be a surprise. The reason I picked Carey personally, I was just looking at their stats before we came on, that their batting stats are pretty similar, both average in the sort of low to mid 30s. But I think that Carey in the last few seasons has shown a definite rise, and he's averaging much more than that, albeit he's had a bad start with the bat this season. But that aside, I think that his the upside that he has shown, if you sort of think of what he might do at his best, is to me above what Inglis can do at his best. As far as their glove work, I always say I don't know who's the better keeper, and I don't trust people who have strong opinions on that, because without numbers to back it up, lots of people would say, oh, Mark Waugh was a better batter than Steve Waugh if he didn't have the batting average to prove that was not the case. So people they see one good catch or one dropped catch and form an opinion. I think they are fairly reluctant to change. So I can't tell as far as the glovemanship, but I think Carey and some of the innings that he played in tough circumstances in the World Cup, albeit in white ball cricket, showed that he's a very classy sort of batsman and developing. So he'd be the one I'd pick.
So you don't think Gilly or Punter or Warney can judge whether one keeper's better than the other?
Well,
I'm just asking.
Oh, you mean in terms of who's the better glove? Well, case in point,
yes.
Shane Warne, even with batting average, I think thinks that Mark Waugh's a better batter than Steve Waugh. So that's a bit of a concern. No, I mean, to be quite honest, that I don't think there's a lot between these players. That most of what a wicketkeeper does is fairly standard. That they, what is it, 540 balls in a day. There might only be 2 balls or 3 balls a day that separates the great keeper from the very good keeper. And often those 3 balls, one of them does well, and the other 2, the other does well. So I don't think there's as much between them as they think. And I'm not sure without a number that anyone can really judge.
My brother said to me not so long ago that you would suggest Glenn Maxwell as the wicketkeeper for the Gabba.
Oh, well, goes without saying. That's who I think it should be. Give him 2 weeks of training. You get a magnificent athlete behind the stumps. I'm sure he'd do better. So I didn't say that because I knew that you'd probably throw me off the podcast if I did. But it's like you're saying. As an analogy, it would be, imagine if all sprinting, the 100 meters is always done via a time trial, so you couldn't see who actually won the race, but you also didn't time it. And you're saying, oh, you can't, you think that Usain Bolt can't determine between X and Y, the 2 premier runners of the day? I'd say, well, without a clock, probably not.
Yeah, I don't know if wicket-keeping's quite as... I don't know if you can... Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue with you. I just don't know. I think there is something intrinsic you can see with wicket-keepers, the way they move. But you're right. You probably can't ever put a figure on that. I just wanted
though, the way they move, you can just tell the way.
Yeah, but you can't put a figure on that because there's a finish line. There's no finish line for a wicket-keeper. Like, I could tell you if Inglis or Carey was faster, but I can't tell you because if you put a finish line, but...
No, by the terms of my analogy, it was done one at a time running. That's what I said. If they ran one at a time each.
But you're still timing it.
No, I said you weren't allowed to time them. Did you listen to nothing I said?
I did.
All I'd say is this, to continue this bizarre sprinting analogy that I come up with. Michael Johnson, one of the greatest runners of all time, if you didn't have a clock and you didn't have any stats, which is basically what we have with wicketkeepers, everyone would have said he was a slow runner because he had a weird technique. Thank you.
Okay. So yeah, look, I'm really happy with either Carey or Inglis for the Gabba, and I'm not trying to like echo Paul here and say there's not much between them, but I think Carey's probably a slightly more of a sure bet. And I don't know if you remember that innings he played against England in the 2019 World Cup, Paul, but he looked excellent in a very high pressure situation. So I think he could do well there. But then again,
if you pick Inglis, that's what I referred to earlier in the podcast. Yes,
I know. And you referred to it, I think, in another show as well. But I think Inglis is an awesome talent, and you could maybe go, well, let's just back this guy in. So I don't think you're going to get a big difference there. I do want to pay tribute to Paine, I guess, before we move on to Cummins and Smith a little bit more from their press conference. But look, I think despite the way Paine handled all this, he did do a good job as Australian captain. He obviously wasn't perfect on the field. He didn't always behave perfectly, but I think coming out of Sandpaper Gate, he did a great job. He was a good leader in very tough circumstances. And look, Pat Cummins did say that one of the reasons Paine is decided to make this break is so that he's not a distraction for the squad leading into the series. So, you know, again, he's fallen on his sword. And look, I think he completely botched this whole thing from the beginning, from sending the pictures to and the text to now. But I also think Cricket Australia botched this. And Paul, I was thinking those two board members that are still on the board now from that time, they have to go, don't they?
Well, I suppose they would say that David Peaver and others would say that they made the right decision at the time, and it's just that the full facts aren't in the public domain. And so I think that without having those full facts, it's difficult. Now, I know that there's that court case pending. I think it's going to be in early next year with the staffer in question. That look, if all of the facts come out and it confirms what your fears are, then yeah, I would agree with that. But short of that, I don't think that you can make that call.
I just think not releasing the information at the time was the error, that they needed to put something out. I actually think Paine needed to do like a tell-all interview a couple of months later, like, you know, front page of the Sun Herald, my biggest regret. And he needed to do something. He couldn't just let it come out like this.
Yeah, but from his point of view, he had been cleared by the board, and I think he'd got the impression that was going to be something that they would stick solid with when and if it did come out. So I just think that that's unrealistic. Who would do that in that situation? Because it's not as though everyone was going to say, "Oh, great, so proud of you for being honest. You're going to win the toss and bat or bowl." It would have been, "You're what?" And it would have been a very similar reaction, I think, to what we've now had. Now it probably would have meant, if he had disclosed this 2 years ago, that his captaincy would have come to an end 2 years ago, just as ignominiously as now.
Maybe though he could have controlled the narrative. Anyway, I guess his greatest achievement as a cricketer will be the 2019 Ashes series, where he was able to help Australia retain the Ashes for the first time in 18 years on English soil. And look, I did want to sort of go through a few more things to do with the Pat Cummins thing. So he's the first fast bowler in 65 years. He made his debut 10 years ago. And he was very clear in the press conference that he wanted Steve Smith as his vice captain for his tactical acumen, that he would need Smith's guidance and help on field sometimes. He also said he's got the final call, but I think he didn't want to say, for example, them to go, all right, we'll give Marnus Labuschagne as your vice captain to see if we can sort of, you know, build him into leader. He wanted someone he could actually lean on the field.
Yes, and I also think there would have to have been a pragmatic viewpoint in his mind as well, that if you excluded Smith altogether, then, and maybe Smith is such a noble character that this wouldn't have occurred, but you would have had to have had the fear that he might have been slightly, you know, more than slightly slighted by this, and would then be kind of potentially a destabilizing influence in the side. As again, maybe Smith wouldn't be, but certainly in politics that, you looked at when recent years when a prime minister has been knifed or an opposition leader has been knifed and then hung around, they were a very, very bad influence on their party. So I think it would make sense to sort of say, let's have him as the number 2 person and remove that from an issue as well.
Yeah, and there was a few questions about, what might happen when Cummins is bowling with the field and stuff. And I think that's where Cummins will use Smith a little bit. And also Smith was asked, how he sort of feels taking this role on as vice captain after Sandpapergate. Obviously, it's a return to a leadership position for him. And there are some hardliners out there that just don't think that should be happening. I'm really surprised. I've got some mates that, like cricket, but, and they've sent me messages in the last few hours saying they're disappointed Smith's in a leadership role again after South Africa, which I disagree with. But Smith said he's expecting that. He said he's grown and matured since what happened in South Africa, and I believe that.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with him being in a leadership role again. I wouldn't have chosen him to be captain, but I would have been fine with him being captain in the sense that I don't think that the Sandpapergate should prevent that. And I mean, you've got to look back at what actually happened. By all accounts, he was a weak leader who didn't stand up to some cheating that was occurring. And you read the account of Greg Chappell that he was struggling. He was mentally gone. He'd had the tough Ashes. This series was spiraling out of control. It sounds more to me that he was a bit incompetent, and that's too strong a word because I don't think many of us would be competent in that situation. He just didn't handle a very difficult situation well. And of course, he should have stood up to it. But the fact that he didn't, look, some of the other things that have been done, we come back to Ben Stokes as well, that, no one's seemingly criticising from England the fact that Ben Stokes is considered for leadership roles in English cricket. I think what Steve Smith did is a fraction as concerning as that. So I think he's suffered enough. He's had a whopping big penalty for something that he shouldn't have done, and he deserved a penalty, but I'm happy to move on from that.
Yeah. Thanks to everybody leaving comments. We will get to all the comments at the end, as is the custom for these live shows, but pop any questions or anything in there and we will get to them. I agree with your sentiments about Smith. Cummins was also asked whether, the board asked him about, if there's any skeletons in the closet, so to speak, and then also how he dealt with that kind of stuff. And Cummins again answered it very well, said that, he's his own harshest critic, and, he needs to be able to sleep at night more than anything, which I think is a great response to that sort of line of questioning.
Yep. The other one that I thought that was a very interesting answer was when they said to him, inevitably fast bowlers get a bit injured or there's going to be some rotation. How do you kind of feel about that? And he was very, very emphatic about the fact that he didn't intend to rotate. He'd never rotated out of a test side and he didn't intend to start now. He then added, look, if I do get injured or something does happen, Smith will take over and that's great. But I thought that was another definitive answer that he gave, which was interesting and impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why he realises then he won't be able to be there for all the white ball stuff, so it'll have to be another skipper. He was also asked about what kind of leader he's going to be, and he said he wants to be a leader that sort of empowers his players, that he backs them, and he's that they've got to the test level because they're good, so he's going to back them and let understand that they know their own game, so to speak. And that was sort of a little insight. It was interesting when I spoke to Steve Waugh last week. He said that, I asked him why he seemed to back his bowlers all the time. And he said it was because, when he had the ball in his hand, he didn't like it when a skipper, tried to tell him what to do, because it was like, mate, I've got the ball in my hand. I'm the one, bowling. So it's a very simple thing, but I think it's the right way to go for Cummins.
Yep. There's a bit of Chappelli about that. It's funny because Chappelli, who always criticises Steve, well, there are more similarities between them than you might think. Ian Chappell was always big about that, if they ever came into the dressing room when Australia was 9 down and about to go out to bowl and offered him the box of balls and which one would you like to pick, he's almost offended that they would come to him. He'd say, I gave it straight to the fast bowlers. I wanted nothing to do with that kind of thing. That's their job. They're the experts in that. So there's a bit of Chappelli there. What I would like to see from Cummins is a bit of Chappelli on the field as well. And that will be interesting. That I think that Cummins is going to do a magnificent job in captaincy in all aspects, but except one. And I'm not saying he's going to do a bad job in that, but most captains these days do a bad job in that, and that is being sufficiently aggressive on the field. Not being aggressive because it's the fun thing to do or the right way to play cricket, but being aggressive because that's the best chance you've got of winning a test match and actually the best chance you've got of avoiding losing a test match. So will he be someone who's got the deep point back too quickly? Will he drop the third slip out of there too quickly? Will he, Australia not bat aggressively to set a declaration target and all those sorts of things? Or will he have a bit more of Ian Chappell? And Michael Clarke was the other one who really did that. If he can tick that box, then he's got the skill set to be one of Australia's finest ever captains.
Is there anything else that jumped out at you from the press conference that you wanted to touch on, Paul?
I thought that Smith spoke quite well as well. One thing that I thought was a bit interesting was towards the end that Smith got the question, how will it feel when you are vice captain of Australia walking out on Boxing Day? And Smith would have been entitled to say, well, mate, a lot less good than it felt a few years ago when I was bloody well captain walking out on Boxing Day. But he showed that he has great, but not that he necessarily would have snapped in the past. He doesn't strike me as that sort of person, but he answered it beautifully and just sort of said what an honor it would be and how great Boxing Day was. And he played a very straight bat to that. And I liked that. So I thought his performance in the press conference was pretty good as well.
Yeah, I agree. I guess, I've been lucky enough to have Pat on this podcast once before for Patrick, as he's now called, as the captain, had him on the podcast, and we did a sort of a long form interview a few years ago, not long after Cape Town. And I've also, ran in and chatted to Patrick a few times around commentating for New South Wales. And look, I have to say, Patrick is a standout. There's just something about him. He's one of the very few guests I've had on this show that genuinely the next time I saw them really wanted to know how the episode turned out and if I was happy with it. So there is some sort of magic to Pat Cummins. It's not a myth. Like when you get close to him, he doesn't disappoint. And so please don't some scandal come out, Pat. I mean, please don't disappoint me.
Yes, I think that Patrick James will be an excellent captain. I'm going to step it up a bit, put his middle name in there as well.
Excellent. And finally as well, look, it's been a somber start to the day with the Paine news. You never like to see something like that. But actually, by now, Paul, I'm starting to think today's actually been great for Australia's Ashes hopes. So all of a sudden, Payne's gone. We don't have any of that hovering around the team. We're either going to get Carey, who's a one-day player already, or get the exciting new English for the Gabba. The new era of leadership begins. So, whatever you say about Paine, he wasn't irreplaceable as an on-field captain. There's no doubt about that. Now we've got this new era with Superman Pat Cummins in charge. He's got the redemption story Steve Smith next to him. I actually think this makes Australia a lot stronger at the Gabba than maybe a week ago before the sexting scandal broke.
Yeah, I see your reasoning, but I still think at the moment, well, what we've got, we've swapped out a very competent wicketkeeper batter, and we're going to replace him with a very competent wicketkeeper batter. So I think it doesn't make a major difference, and I know that's going to annoy you, but that's how I feel.
I feel like someone's just dropped a wet blanket on me after that passionate statement.
No, it's a lovely statement. It's just I'm more about facts and figures and numbers, and that's these intangible.
Well, I'll give you a bloody fact. Pat Cummins is our captain now. He wasn't a week ago.
I know.
So that's a fact.
That's going to certainly improve his outswinger, isn't it?
Well, I think it will maybe improve our tactics on the field. I mean, you're the one who was just talking about how good it would be to have an aggressive captain. Maybe he'll be better than Paine was with that stuff.
But I was implying that maybe he won't be, and I hope that he will be. Actually, one other thing just on that what I think is nice to go back to my comments about Smith earlier, the fact that probably, given that Cummins may at some stage be injured, or in spite of what he said today, might have to rest for a test match. I think it'll be really nice if Steve Smith does get to captain Australia again, even if it is only a one-off. I think that's going to be nice.
Yeah, look, this might be his sort of path in to replace Finch as the white ball captain when Finch is dropped later this summer. But look, I was on the BBC radio before, and they asked me for an Ashes.
What's that?
Sorry?
Say that again.
I was on the BBC earlier at prime time, 4:30 in the morning in England, and they asked me for a prediction for the Ashes, and I was sort of calculating in my head, and look, I was thinking 2-2 before the series started, but now I'm thinking 3-1 Australia. I don't think it's going to be a complete shellacking, maybe 3-2, but I just think we're in great shape now, and look out, England, it's going to be the Cummins Smith show.
What you should have said was 5-0 England, so that for the English audience, and on the miracle chance that it actually happened to be that, they might call you back and give you a full-time gig.
They did say they were going to record my answer and then play it back to me at the end of the series. So, but I also said to them they call me when Australian cricket test captains resign in tears. So, all right, let's go through the questions. Ray, congratulations, Pat Cummins, best bowler in Test cricket. Ray again, who's your keeper for the Gabba Manners? I think if I was George Bailey, I'd be going Josh Inglis. And Paul earlier said he'd probably go Alex Carey, but it doesn't make a difference. Chris Stone, will Cummins still be subject to fast bowler rotation? Do you think? Question mark. Is that why they have picked experienced Smith as the vice captain? Look, we did touch on this, but I think Pat Cummins actually hasn't missed any test matches. So I don't see why everyone's thinking all of a sudden he's going to start missing them. Like, I think he's actually one of the least injury-prone fast bowlers of the last 3 years.
I think it's also not just the rotation, but it's also the when Cummins, not that he gets very tired, but if he does need to have a breather and let someone else run the ship while he's in the middle of a difficult spell, that Smith is the logical choice. But I still think that the main reason is just pragmatic, that if they'd appointed Labuschagne, it wouldn't have gone down as well. There would have a lot of people saying, oh, it's like when you appointed Kim Hughes into a leadership position when he wasn't ready for it. You had Rod Marsh glowering on the sidelines with Dennis Lilly. Why create a Rod for their own back? So I think it's a nice thing to say that Smith's tactical astuteness is the reason, but I think it's more about pragmatism.
Yeah, I think there is an element, though, that they do invite the sandpaper discussion back into the public discourse now that Smith's a leader again, whereas Labuschagne wouldn't have. I guess I have read a couple of articles sort of musing that, what if it would ever come out that all the fast bowlers at Cape Town knew exactly what was going on, and now you've got Pat Cummins as skipper.
Imagine if David Warner tomorrow calls a press conference.
Yes. Cummins sent him a dick pic.
I didn't mean that, goose.
That was a joke. All right. Ray, any chance of a change of head coach, Jason Gillespie? I actually don't think this will happen right now. Who knows what will happen at the end of Langer's contract? But there has been a noticeable sort of, I guess, disappearance of Langer. Really, he's sort of faded into the background, hasn't he, Paul?
A little bit. I think that you actually ditched a question before that. We didn't answer it. I don't want to. One of the.
So what was it?
It was one about whether Khawaja would. Yeah, there. Your fast bowlers in the Gabba, Stark or Richardson, and Khawaja should play over Harris. Well, on that, I would say that I would certainly pick Richardson over Stark, and I think that Harris is going to be a lock for the opener, and it's just going to come down to who they pick for number 5. I think they're probably maybe slightly favouring Head, although that's yet to be seen. I'd probably pick Khawaja though, just over Head. All right, next one now.
I did hear Ian Healy on the radio not so long ago say he was at a function, and there seems to be a movement to get Inglis in the test side. So just put that in your. If it happens, you heard it here first. I would pick Richardson, and it'll be an interesting discussion for Pat Cummins. Obviously, as captain, he'll be consulted. He's great mates with Stark. He Hazelwood a very tight unit. So his first call might be to say, "Look, I think we should rest Stark."
You maybe rest Lyon and go into the opening test with 4 quicks.
Well, actually, I thought more about not the first test, but say the Adelaide test. So you said to me something interesting. Say, they want to pick Stark or Richardson they want to pick Richardson for the Gabba, but then they want to bring Stark in for Adelaide. But if they pick Richardson and he does well at the Gabba, then you have to keep him. So you're in a tough spot for the Adelaide. But you could actually not play line in Adelaide. You could play the 4 quicks and Labuschagne as your spinner.
Yeah, Travis Head got a couple of wickets as well today, I think, in the Shield game. All right, cool. And now
then on the head coach, what do you think?
I think that Langer will certainly see out the Ashes, and then his contract is up mid-year, but we've got some tours before that, so he'll definitely see it out either to the end of his contract or a logical point before that. And my inkling is that he will. I don't think he will remain as the complete coach of all formats. I think he'll either, when the tenure comes up, that he'll end, or he'll stay on maybe as just the test coach, and they'll put someone like Trevor Bayliss in as the white ball coach. But I think they might have an appetite for making a clean break, and maybe McDonald as the test coach, Bayliss as the white ball coach, or just the T20 coach if they want to go down that path. Gillespie's obviously a possibility, but it doesn't seem to be mentioned in dispatches as much as those other two.
Yeah, Steve Waugh said quite publicly last week that he thinks they should reappoint Langer already after the World Cup win. And look, it's going to be hard if they, smash England and they've won the T20 World Cup. It's going to be hard to sack him. So that's an interesting one. Martin Lawrence.
But that's what they're paid the big bucks to do that. It's not sacking him. If they think that even though he's done all these wonderful things, that assuming that we win the Ashes, that it's time to make a change, they need to have the courage of their convictions and make the change.
All right, next question from AA. What's your Ashes prediction? I believe it will be a tight one. I've given mine. I think it's going to be Australia 3-1 or 3-2. What about you, Paul?
I can't give it yet. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm still not sure. Keep listening to the podcast, AA, and then at some point in the next couple of weeks, I'll give it. That makes me sound like I'm being grand, but I just haven't thought about it enough.
Yeah, mine could change 5 times between now and the first day. So, because who knows what could happen. The last week has been a Martin Lawrence, not a question, just a joke. Welcome to the Athletics podcast. That was after Paul went into great detail about Johnson's running style. AA, how many more hidden skeletons are in the board's cabinet? Maybe we never know. Now, this is an interesting point, Paul, because so in 2018, when they're saying they need to clean out Cricket Australia, we need a better image, we need to be honest, we need to be transparent. At the same time, they're covering up the Paine inquiry.
Yep. But again, as much as it's an easy thing to criticize them for, and it's probably the correct thing to criticize them for, I would like to be able to put a sort of a hypothetical situation and see all the major sports boards all around the world, how many of them would have made it public. I think most of them probably wouldn't have. I think it's goes with the territory of being a CEO of a major organization, that you just think the damage that it's going to do to the brand, even if it's going to come out at some stage in the future, well, we don't know for sure it's going to come out. When it does come out, the damage will be just as bad as if we put it out now. So let's do nothing. I think that's just almost an automatic reaction for most administrators.
Yeah, well, they completely stuffed this one up. All right, AA, total ban of leadership role on Warner is against natural justice. The bloke has matured. I have to say, I think I totally agree with it, AA. I understand some people, they just can't forgive and forget, but I think it's silly. I think Warner is too good a leader not to be allowed to lead at any level in Australian cricket. And I agree with AA. It is against natural justice.
I tend to agree as well. I think that he should have got, even if they gave him an extra year above what Smith had and made it 1 year out of the team and then a further 2 years of no leadership roles, I think what he did was bad, but, I agree with you, Menas.
Now, Jared Davison, I hope somebody is helping him, and I think this must be Tim Paine, look after his mental health. Sports people often link their ability to perform sport to their identity and can struggle when it disappears. And I think hopefully Paine is getting the support. His manager said that they were keeping an eye out for him. And as I said, it was really clear from the Australian players that they're, supporting Paine. And, Yeah, it's a tough time for him and his family. Awful.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the whole consideration of even if he was planning on retiring at the end of this series, it's one thing to retire at the end of a potentially Ashes winning series that you've been captain of and then smoothly move into all sorts of media opportunities to now possibly vanish ignominiously, and those media opportunities may well dry up. It's a long thing to, it's a serious thing to contemplate, and there wouldn't be much brightness to cling on to. So yeah, definitely, I hope that he's getting the help that he needs.
AA, do you think Paddy Cummins would participate in the IPL now as he has more responsibility? I think there's 3 million reasons why he will participate in the IPL for the next 2 seasons, Patrick.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the calendar in detail. We have got lots of tours to the subcontinent coming up. So as long as there's not, we've got to squeeze that South African series in again as well. But you could also argue with good reason that we do want to win a Test series in India. Every ball that Pat Cummins bowls and bats against in India, as with all the players, can only help.
Yeah, and last one, it's AA been firing them in. This is the last one. AA, actually, this is not a question, just a hashtag. Neeson must play. Is this Barrett Sundaresan in disguise? So unfortunately, Neeson just got a little injured at the wrong time. He's missed a Shield game, and he also had to take a break while his first child was born. So, yeah, I don't think he'll play at the Gabba, but I think we will see him in Australian colours really soon. He's a class act, no doubt.
He's unlucky that we haven't got an Ashes tour coming up soon, and he was probably unlucky not to play in the 2019 Ashes because I think English conditions are where his bowling would really blossom. So I'm not so sure, Menace. I think he's actually been passed by. Not completely, but I think that whereas he was always knocking on the door, even though Pattinson has now retired, certainly Richardson has jumped above him, and maybe one or two others as well. So let's hope that he gets a game, if nothing else, at least in the 2023 Ashes.
Yep. Well, look, that's it for the news of the day. Big weekend of cricket coming up, Paul. India hosting New Zealand. Bangladesh and Pakistan playing. So lots of cricket to watch. I can't wait for the WBBL final on Saturday. Perth Scorchers hosting the Adelaide Strikers. So, yeah, my weekend sorted. And maybe I'm commentating on Sunday at Manly Oval if it doesn't rain.
Fantastic. That New Zealand have made a pretty good start against India. None for 93 in reply to 345. A long way to go, but you never know.
What do you got planned for the weekend, Paul?
Meeting some friends tomorrow, and I am keen to watch the WBBL final as well. If all things were equal, I'd love to watch the entirety of the India-New Zealand test, but I probably won't watch a ball of it because I've got other things on, but that would be great.
Yeah, Shreyas Iyer's 100 on debut was quite special. So we've seen him light up the IPL, and he's done it on his first attempt at Test cricket. So I'm sure there's a few happy Iyer fans out there. All righty. Well, thanks to everybody who's watched live on YouTube. Thanks to everybody that's fired in the questions. Another big day of Australian cricket news. We send our best to Jelisa, who'll be joining us next week. We're going to sort out the internet. And, yeah, thanks for listening.
See ya.
Bye.